All right, Nicki, so we're a couple weeks into the offseason, and I think we both know that an offseason with Washington is never really an offseason. What have you learned in your time here in the 2 years, and also compared to how other stops in the NFL, how it is here?
It just keeps going. It's a different kind of season. It's not the postseason usually.
Yeah.
It's just a different kind of season. There's always news. There's always something. I've only covered one other team, obviously the Broncos, and they were similar. I don't feel like any team is to the degree that Washington is at in terms of all the things that they have going on, because it, includes the DEA, it includes Congress, it includes so much more than just football. But I
always forget about the DEA part.
Yeah.
It's always and the DEA.
Yeah. So there's always something. The Broncos always had something too. It was never a quiet moment, but this is like next level. But I enjoy it. Keeps me busy. Keeps me out of trouble.
It certainly keeps us busy. There's no doubt. Yeah. And again, you weren't here when it was the previous regime, but in the time here, what changes have you seen made that is it a better, are they in a better spot, do you think, from when you arrived here?
Football wise, or
I think let's start football wise, and then we can work to, if you feel anything overall that it's better.
Yeah. Football wise, it's hard to say. I mean, I do feel like players have bought in to what Ron is trying to do and the way he's trying to go about it. Statistically, they're pretty much at the exact same point they were. But I feel like you could argue that certain positions are better. Offensive line last year, I don't know if it'll be the same this year if they don't have Brandon Sheriff back. You can start to see what they're trying to do. And I feel this way about any team if they're rebuilding, if they're trying to improve, no matter what. If you don't have a quarterback, it's
right.
It doesn't matter. I hate to say it like that, but it's true. It's true. It's become even more important, I feel like, over the years. You have to have one of the elite guys to win and to win it all. Otherwise, you're just going to be stuck in kind of this quarterback purgatory for
unless you have like an elite defense, and then you have Yeah. But
I think they have some really good pieces, and I still think they have potential. I still have a lot of questions, though, certainly about the coaching staff. Are they the right guys to lead these folks? Not Ron, but does Jack Del Rio, does he want to stay here for the long term? What is the vision for the defense? Certain positional coaches, are they the right guys to teach these players? Because there are a lot of young guys. And does the team itself, do the players, do they get along? Do they like each other? It's so hard for us to know fully because we're not in like normal years. But it's, there have been moments that have kind of made me question, is there a strong rapport? And I feel like that's so important for any team to really go far.
But you bring up a point too with not being in the locker room and not, because people ask the same questions for all of us, like, does a locker room, still believe in this or that? And like, well, we're not in there. And so you get a different snippet, right? Right.
And when we get guys on the podium, it would be the same for me if I were on the podium facing a wall of cameras and, 15 reporters sitting in front of me. I probably wouldn't be my normal self. I would probably be a little bit more uptight. So you don't get, you get, most of the time their honesty, but not the full picture. So it's just a different kind of conversation and vibe. But organizationally, I don't know. It's tough to say because you don't really know fully what's going on behind the scenes. The team has said that Dan has stepped away from day-to-day operations. Tanya Snyder's now co-CEO, and kind of running that side of things. We do know, because Ron has said multiple times that he speaks with both about daily things and long-term things with the team. The future of Jason Wright and his executive team seems pretty fluid. People have come and gone. So it's not quite clear what's going on there either. I think with a rebranding, maybe perhaps there will start to be some clarity on what this team is.
Do you think on that executive side, because I was asked this earlier in the week, like, do you, is it some of the changes, is it normal or is it not? And I wonder too, because some of the moves have been like some more key spots, but they're also bringing out people from the outside, sometimes outside the sport, who may want to go back to another sport.
Right.
Or they don't feel the same tie and pull here that you might have elsewhere. So maybe it's easier to leave. And also I think that sometimes people come in and realize like, oh my gosh, I didn't know it was going to be like this.
Right. No, exactly. Yeah. I think it's been different for different individuals. The most notable recent one, obviously, is Damon Jones, their chief legal officer, who left. And I mean, he was in baseball before he came over here. He was with the Nationals for 13 years. And he went back to the Dodgers. So actually, Jason Wright kind of predicted he would go back to a baseball team and become like a president of a baseball team. I didn't think it would be this soon. The surprising part for me is, we were told that he was kind of the lead on finding a new stadium. Right. So now what? Right. So yeah, I mean, as these things happen, it kind of creates more questions.
Does it signal trouble to you? Does it signal an issue to you, or it just questions?
That's the thing. It's so hard to say. I mean, a little bit, yes, just because of the team's history, and knowing the issues that have been in that front office, for much of the last 20 years. But, I don't want to make assumptions for the new group going in. I do think a lot of them are, I think each one is individual. So it's hard to say. They're pretty tight-lipped with a lot of things that are going on there.
They are, but it's funny because like for as much the previous regimes, there was a lot of stability in certain areas here. And it was a lot of behind the scenes stuff. Now that also could explain why they didn't win as much, and sometimes it was maybe stability for the wrong reasons, but there was that stability. And I don't know that I still think they're trying to shape how it's going to go. I also wonder in a year how different it might be.
Right. After the rebranding, will this executive team stay, the core of it stay, or did a lot of these folks come on board to kind of lead that charge? And once it's done, will they pursue other things? I mean, I think Jason Wright has become more of a household name anymore. Will he get plucked from, another industry, another league for a more prominent role, or heck, would he go into politics? I don't know, but I do think a lot of the folks that have come in, they do seem very well-intentioned. Whether they can accomplish all the things that they want to do and improving the franchise and kind of remaking the organizational structure of the team, we'll see. But, I think they come in with the best of intentions. Some of their decisions haven't always been spot on. And I think maybe you could attribute that to them just not knowing the team well, not knowing the area well, many of them not knowing the sport or the league well, and kind of how the fan base might respond to a lot of these things.
So knowing all that, then how do you think this rebrand goes?
I don't want to make assumptions. Yeah. I mean, I do. I mean,
and we don't know. Yeah.
It's like it's very possible. The only thing I will assume is that people will hate it. There will be some that love it, some will hate it, because it happens with any sort of change. You rebrand a website, you change the look of it. It's like some will hate it, some will love it, and that's pretty much the only thing you can kind of guarantee.
And I get that, because to be honest, I used to look like Brad Pitt, and I did this rebrand, and a lot of people did not like the new look.
You lost a lot of followers, huh?
I did lose a lot of followers. But I also think like they're put in a tough spot where you're having to come up and change things where, this was an iconic franchise and it wasn't their decision to do it, but they're tasked with finding a different way. Right. And I don't know, like we keep hearing how these players love the uniforms, but will fans like them? Because to me, it's going to be a jarring scene for them. And I don't, but is that something that people can grow with? That's the key, is can they grow with it, and whatever, and the name, We'll see.
I mean, a couple of these players, like Jarrett Patterson, grew up diehard fans. They have a better understanding of the history of the franchise, the importance of it.
They have a commanding sense of the history here.
Yeah, it's very admirable what they've done. But like a lot of them weren't even born when they're like decades after they were born, when this team was, a marquee franchise in the league.
And so that's why I think they're tasked with a very difficult project here. And so I'm like you, like fans aren't going to like the name regardless, or at least at best it'll be that might be all, and some people
as bad as I thought.
And some people would just be glad, like, all right, now they're no longer, it's not the horse with no name, but the team with no name. At least you have a name, your identity moving forward. Now you get behind it or you don't. And then it all goes back to the field, which let's go back there now. So that's a good segue there, man.
Look at that. Was beautiful.
This is why, in my third, I think I've done this for 3 years now. That's what I've learned. Just that little segue right there.
Yeah, it's nice.
Podcast veteran here. But anyways, so obviously the quarterback is a big offseason question. In your mind, like within that question, like, how do you think this gets answered? Like, because we know it's the biggest question, but how do you think it gets answered? And
I don't know that it gets answered. I just kind of reading between the lines of what Ron has said and over the last couple months as the focus has kind of shifted to the coming season, I feel like they're going to try to make a play for a veteran. Now, which ones are going to be available? That's the question. Are you going to take a big swing if Aaron Rodgers is available? Would Aaron Rodgers want to come here? Deshaun Watson, you got a lot to deal with there. Yeah. So do you want to go down that road, especially with, the things this organization has dealt with in recent years? Or do you want to go to one of the kind of the second tier guys? Like if Derek Carr is available, Jimmy Garoppolo, I would not rule out Mitchell. And I'm not saying this because I went to Carolina. I would not rule out Mitchell Trubisky. I'm not saying I believe he would be the answer.
Oh no, listen, he's going to be looked at.
I do think
there's no doubt
they would definitely consider him if it's an option, because look at this team's history. They pluck guys from Carolina. They like guys that come well recommended from the Bills because they like that staff.
Correct. Well, and because they had that staff with them in Carolina. Right. So I think that's listen, I would not, at this point, you cannot dismiss him as a possibility. I think, listen, if Carson Wentz becomes available, I think you put him on the list as well. Whether or not that's a good move, we'll see. But because I think they clearly want to upgrade. And even like a guy like Rodgers, the question I know for them would be, how long do you have him? And then is it worth, what is it worth to give up a guy for maybe a couple years?
Right. I mean, because, not everybody can be Tom Brady, and a lot of quarterbacks, once they reach a certain point, it can drop off fast. Mm-hmm. Don't know if he's going to be on the Brady side of things or more of the Peyton side of things with kind of how, careers kind of wind down.
He's a little bit, I guess, flakier. Is that, if that's the right word, than Brady? Like, as far as, I shouldn't say that, like, he doesn't seem like Brady was clear. I want to play till 45. Right. I don't know if Rodgers feels that way. I
mean, what if Jeopardy comes available again? You just never know.
Right.
So there's more that, and same could be said for Russell Wilson. He doesn't look like the same player he was. He's still very, very good. And he was dealing with an injury last year, but what is the long-term for him? I would say that in the interim, he would be a significant upgrade. Right. And I think having a player like that draws free agents. Guys want to play for a team that has a really strong quarterback. Are you going to get guys that want to play with Mitchell Trubisky? I don't know. And I would argue that Taylor Heineke might be a better option, but that's not for me to decide. So, there are options there. You don't know which ones are available. None of them seem ideal. And the same could be said for the draft.
Right. And I think that's the problem, is that I do think they're going to get somebody. Now, whether or not it could be a situation like where Kansas City went out and got Alex Smith a few years ago. You get a guy who can take you to a certain level, and then as you keep building your roster, and then you make a second move for the higher level that you consider a higher level. That's always a possibility, because you go get Jimmy G or Derek Carr, that puts you at a certain level right now. You then, is it if they got one of those guys, like, does Dallas clearly have the best quarterback in the division at that point?
I would agree. I think getting a guy at that level helps you continue to build your roster. And then you can add a younger piece, a longer term piece. To me, a Derek Carr makes sense to a degree. Yeah, it'd be great if you could get that elite franchise star, but there's only so many of those in the league. And again, I know Ron thinks he's an optimist, as he says, and he views this as a very appealing spot for a free agent. I think 90% of America would disagree. So just overgeneralizing there, but history matters.
It does. And that's what I was going to say, is because Wilson has a no trade clause. Deshaun Watson, again, I always hate to say putting aside those problems, because you really can't, but I'm trying to keep it from a football standpoint. He's got the no trade clause too. So how do you convince a guy like that this is the place for you over someone else? Yeah.
And Deshaun, I don't know that he has the same leverage he did maybe a year ago. I don't know that he's going to have all the options maybe he thought he did. Maybe he will. Maybe nothing has really changed on that front as far as the teams that are interested, because he's still a very fine quarterback. And you could argue that maybe he's fresher now that he sat out a year versus these other guys who played. But there is a lot there. And
I think the other thing with Trubisky, if you get him, to me, then you pair him with a rookie. Then it depends on who is that rookie. Like, do they take a Des Ridder or Carson Strong in the second, maybe third round? That that become, because then because I think with Trubisky, it'd be clear you're not done. You're not done at that position. And the Athletic came out with a story basically blaming Matt Nagy for all his troubles, which may or may not be true. I think the question is, how much will they buy that here to justify that? And I think maybe there's some to it, but I don't know that you can blame Nagy for everything that went wrong with Trubisky. So I think he'd be a big question mark, but I do think
I feel like every team feels like they can fix another team's problems, right? It's the same with head coaches. They recycle head coaches. Oh, he didn't work out there, but he'll work with us, even though he's been recycled through 5 different teams. The quarterback, they broke him in New York. He'll totally work in Carolina. Doesn't always work out that way.
It does not, and they make that mistake a lot. One thing I learned from Joe Gibbs when he was here, he would say this a lot. Like, people, he would say, people always tell me, Joe, you can change this guy. He's like, this guy's been like this for 20 some years. What makes you think I can change him in one? So no, so he understood. Now, every coach still thinks at some point they can, but I think he understood that I can't do everything. I'm not a miracle worker. Sure. And, you were talking about, is it mechanics that you have to fix? Is it study habits? I don't think with Trubisky that it's about that. I think it's more, I think there's some mechanical issues. He didn't have experience at Carolina. He only played the 1 year at Carolina. So I think that was a factor. So there are reasons why they could sit there in their mind and say, well, there's this and this. But I also think they'll probably try to trade for somebody first. That would be if I had to put money down, if we went back to Vegas and instead of playing the video roulette and I put $5 on this, I'd probably put it on them trade.
Missed opportunity. Hey, the Pro Bowl and the East-West Shrine game are still in Vegas. Now's your chance.
Well, there's my chance. I can go back and win $35 more. So there we go. With looking at the roster then too, where are some of the biggest questions you still have? Because again, especially offensively, Ron will say that I think this roster is there to do this. Where do you still have concerns about that roster offensively, especially?
Offensively, I know he's optimistic about the O-line. I would agree that group exceeded expectations given everything they went through. Down to at one point in practice, they were down to their 5th center, John Toth, male model. How many teams even have 5 centers on their roster, So I think you got to give a lot of credit to the coaching, Matsko. I think they really develop guys. and they really keep those guys ready. And I think their offseason pickups at that position were actually really good. I mean, I think bringing Eric Flowers back was tremendous. Signing Charles Leonard proved to be a really good signing, and not just on the field, but also with a leadership piece which they sorely needed. But will that line still be the same if you don't keep Brandon Sheriff? I mean, he's a 5-time Pro Bowler. He didn't play every game, but he's a
hard one.
Yeah.
It's a hard one because, how much money do you give a guy that misses 4 to 5 games a year? That's a tough one, but he's really good.
He's really good. And then on the other side, Sam Cosmi, I thought did really well his rookie season, but he again only played half a season because of injuries, and now his backup, who started the other half, is going to be a free agent, Cornelius Lucas. So will that line be the same? And then receiver, Curtis obviously didn't play. But now, Curtis Samuel went from, and in the team's narrative as, he's not out there, it's things will be better when he's back, to now we're just assuming he's back and it's going to be this dynamic group and a deep group. And, there's no proof of that. I mean, there was such optimism coming into the offseason last year with receivers, and they ended up in the exact same spot with just Terry and really Cam Sims, maybe a little better with Adam Humphries, but he too is going to be a free agent. So, same.
DeAndre Carter did a nice job, but it would still be more in a secondary role going forward.
Right.
And that to me is like with Curtis, they know what he can do because they saw it, but we have to see it here because you always want to see the new spot. And then De'Ami Brown, and does he take that? And there was some. And I talked about this on my last podcast about how there were some signs like on special teams that I really liked as far as being more physical, competitive and all that. But I can't say it's going to translate. We don't know. You need to see it first. It's just,
And they haven't had the best track record with rookie receivers so far, with AGG really struggling the first couple of years, not really getting time on the field, bouncing on and off the practice squad. And I mean, you see that a lot across the league. It's a hard transition for rookie pass catchers. There are only so many that you can plug and play immediately. But you got to see them produce eventually.
And that's where I wonder too, is the quarterback makes a difference. And I'm not going to blame Heineke for De'Ami Brown's lack of development, but does a guy going into a second year where if he's more positioned because he's learned some things, and he talked about how he learned that he has to be more decisive in some areas. Okay, let's say you improve in those areas. Now paired with a veteran quarterback, then does that make a difference? We don't know. And, we do know that it does make it. And there were some plays this year where with Heineke, where you say, like, if there's a veteran quarterback here, he reads this differently automatically. And there were plays where there was one where, can't remember which game it was, but I think De'Ami, receiver on one side has a guy in press. Terry on the other has a guy about 8 yards off, and Terry blows by him because he's a flat foot read. Well, that's one where you have to know at the line, how are you going to read this coverage? And then do you get over here right away and you stayed over here even though it's not open, Terry gets open. But that's a veteran quarterback's thing. And that's something that actually, if Taylor stays as a quarterback, well, you can learn that too. It's not every quarterback goes through that, but that's where having more experience in a vet helps you, and maybe helps a guy like De'Ami. I don't know. So, what about running back? Would you do more there? Do you feel good there moving? And assuming, and you just wrote a story about JD the other day.
Yeah, I was going to say,
they signed him.
Yeah, I like that group. I think Antonio Gibson needs to take the next step. I mean, you look at his numbers. He's among, the top 10 guys and among backs, but I think he needs to take that next step to have it be more consistent. I thought his last game was obviously his finest, and you're not going to expect 146 yards a game, but just the way he played, the way he approached it, I thought was significant. And if you can see more of that consistently, I think you got a heck of a running back. And that was the one thing that JD talked about too. And I know AG has said this, his coaches have said this. It takes time. I mean, JD was a receiver who converted to running back. And you don't just learn the protections overnight. You don't learn how to see those holes that may not be there initially. and see how the blocks form and when the O-line is going to go to the second level. That takes time and reps. And I think AG can get there because he's getting those starter reps.
Yeah.
He's getting that experience. So I like that group. I wouldn't be upset if they added another veteran to it.
Yeah, I think I would add somebody there just because just because. And if Jared Patterson takes a certain step in his development and you say, I'm comfortable with that, you can cut the guy, but I would bring in somebody else just in case, somebody that that if Gibson, because Gibson had some injuries this year, somebody who can take more of the load off of him in a full-time role. But that's where JD would help a lot too, because not that they do the same things necessarily, but you can go to different packages with McKissick there in certain games, and you can still run the ball with them in a different way. So tight end.
I like the group. That was another one similar to O-line where I thought they really made something out of a group that didn't feel like they did anything, once Logan Thomas went out.
And not to interrupt you, but there you're talking about two of the best coaches on the staff, I think.
Yeah,
Matsko and Pete Hayner.
Pete Hayner and John Matsko. I mean, Ricky Seals-Jones, another player who was not what his position is now. He was a receiver coming into the league, and he was, he's been playing the position for a couple of years now, but similar to Logan, hadn't really gotten that time to really refine it. And I think he's a good player. I really do. I think he's a good backup. I thought John Bates was probably their best drafted rookie,
I liked his blocking, man.
Yeah. And I thought you could see noticeable progress in his game. It wasn't just a blocker. He needs to get better at a number of areas, but he could do more. And I like that. I still don't know what Samus Reyes is, but he's an intriguing prospect. And if you got three other guys ahead of him, then you can give him the time he needs to develop.
Well, we know he's a pitch man in Chile. That's what we know.
That he is.
And I think it's like the only thing I worry about is Logan Thomas and that knee injury when he comes back.
Yeah.
That to me is like, that's why I wonder
if he stay healthy.
Right. And do they bring someone else in as like maybe a mid-round draft pick, unless you keep Seals-Jones, you say, well, Seals-Jones and Bates and Thomas and Reyes development, that's enough. And that's okay. But I think that's going to be a lot on Thomas's knee. Last thing then on this, I had two more questions. One, if they go out and get a Jimmy G, Derek Carr, what level do you think this team would be at going into next year based on what we know right now?
Yeah, I mean, I would expect you at least got to get back to where you were in year one statistically and just getting back in the playoffs. It's hard to compare because year one, they're kind of like that new toy where nobody really knows what to expect. You can kind of play off that. And you weren't facing the same kind of competition that you did last year. Right. Hopefully you don't have to deal with as many injuries, as many COVID disruptions. But I think when you upgrade like that, when you're going to give up assets to get what you perceive to be a better quarterback, you got to get at least back there, right. And hopefully beyond. Will Jimmy G take him to the Super Bowl? I mean, he took one team, but they had a lot of pieces. I'm not banking on that. But if he can take them, back to where they were, if they can add more pieces, if he can kind of create some stability, help the younger guys develop, I think that'd be considered a success in my book.
And back to where they were, meaning playoffs. And to me, that playoffs is going to be, I think if you do that, you better be in that 10-win range. And, because like to me, that's where, because if you're doing that, and because then it depends on, does Chase Young does he get back to that trajectory he was on after his rookie year? Does Montez Sweat, having a full year and getting, he had a brutal second half of the year because of a lot of personal stuff and the COVID. And the injury, and so it's going to depend on that too. But like you go out and get one of those guys.
Season. I mean, I did the playoffs were a small bit of success. It's been 2 losing seasons since Ron came in, and he had a lot of work to do. Let's be honest, but at some point, and he said this, at some point you got to make it happen.
Well, in the first year losing season, you built on it. They took over a disaster, and. And so there was progress made. And I think there was a lot of having to reshape the identity of this franchise, et cetera. A lot that they had to deal with. First year, fine. Second year, we all know what it was. There was ups and downs early, injuries, health later, but you got to take that big step. And
Right.
do you think he understands that? It seems to.
Yeah, no, I think he does. Whether they can accomplish that, we'll see. I
see,
think they
right.
expected a bigger step in year 2 than they came up with. And that's where I go back to like your original question. I think year 2 was a disappointment.
Yeah.
We can talk about the incremental progress, but you don't get forever in the NFL. I mean, the urgency, I feel like, is greater than it has ever been, and not just at the quarterback position. I think it's across the board. You know, you got to win.
And I also think here what they have to still understand and realize is this fan base has been waiting a long time.
Yeah.
And they've been promised a lot of things over a long time, and it's delivered in flashes, but never consistently. So you're going to need to show this fan base after this rebranding. You want to get people back. You've got to show more than, hey, we're a 9-win team next year, right? You've got to show some real you need to get this fan base excited again if you want to ever fully recapture what this area should have in that.
And get people back at the stadium. I mean, that's a big thing. And sorry to cut you off, but like, you know, that's where I go back to history matters. I mean, I know Ron is very adamant about wanting to move forward and kind of turn the page and let's keep going. Let's focus on the good things, the progress. You have to consider the history. You have to understand your fan base. You have to understand where this team was and where you want to go with it. I think that's it, to really know what this team needs and what the fans want. I think you have to keep the history of the team in context.
Right. Last thing is, you know, Rivera was going to go to the Senior Bowl. Now he's not. How big a deal do you think that is? And I'll say this, like, they'll still have scouts and assistant coaches down.
Right. I think we'll find out. We'll find out how much his front office really is on the same page after a year of working together. You know, will they come away with, you know, guys that they really feel like could fit this team? I do. I mean, it's hard to say. I mean, he's been tight-lipped about what his process is and what he's focused on. I mean, not calling Ron a liar by any stretch, but I do wonder, you know, might he sneak in and he's telling us, you know, I'm not going to be there, don't bug me, you know, always possible. But, you know, there are other things certainly that he can do from afar. And I know with the combine, a lot of coaches would do that too. You know, you keep some coaches behind to focus on what they need to do, and you stagger them through. So it might be the same case with what they're doing, but, you know, we'll see how much this front office really is aligned.
And the head coach doesn't always go to that either, because sometimes, and like the first year you're hiring coaches, so you send others down there. The one thing I wonder about this time is because all those quarterbacks are going to be there. So you want to get the chance to see them and feel them up close. Yeah. But I also wonder too, Nicki, if this isn't clearly that it's part of their process is focusing on these rookie quarterbacks. But if they also think they're going to be able to trade for one, you know, so you still want to have them. And I don't think it's a sign that, and I don't think it's a sign that, oh, we've got our guy, we don't have to be down there. Because I don't think they know that at this point. There's a lot of guys on that list. But, you know, and you still, like, again, we talked about what if it's Trubisky, then you pair him with the rookie, which one? But they will have guys down there, and you know, so I don't.
The interesting part for me is, you know, when you talk about head coaches that not all of them go, not all of them sign off on every single move too. That's the other thing that's different about this. Ron calls the shots. So does he need to see the player in person? Because he talked a lot about, you know, over the last year or so about not getting that personal time with guys. He has a chance. Will he lose that? You know, I got to think, you know, somebody's been doing it this long. He certainly knows better than I do.
And he also trusts Marty Herney, who will be there. Yeah, who would be down there. So there you go. Nicki, thanks a lot. You're the best. Appreciate it.
Thanks for having me.